right, now a new YouGov survey reveals a striking divide in Americans' trust in the media and the Trump administration when it comes to delivering the facts fully, accurately, and fairly. With only 29% of Americans expressing significant trust in the media, that's a sharp decline from years past, but yet 44% place more faith in Donald Trump's administration. So questions of bias, tone, credibility, all front and center. The survey also finds that 4 in 10 Americans believe the media is rooting for Trump to fail. I'm shocked it's only 4 in 10, while perceptions of overly negative coverage continue to grow. Joining us now to break down these findings is Jeanette Hoffman, a Republican strategist and president of Marathon Communications. Jeanette, thank you for being with us this morning. Good to have you on.
Thanks so much for having me, Ken.
Now, are you as stunned as I am that only 4 in 10 Americans believe that the media wants Trump to fail? I think it's 11. I think 11 in 10 Americans think. I have never, look, I worked in mainstream media. I worked at ABC. I worked even at Fox. I worked at CBS and years ago at NBC. Literally, the mindset in all the newsrooms, it's a bunch of 20-something left-wingers from the Upper West Side who all hate the right. They hate Trump. You try to even suggest one story that's positive for Republicans, it doesn't get on. That's just the reality. So the idea that only 4 in 10 Americans think that the media is rooting against Trump is a shocker. How did you feel about that?
Yeah, well, listen, I'm not surprised that almost half the country thinks that the media is rooting against Trump. If you look at some of the words and some of the phrases that come out in some of the media stories we're looking at, especially on the editorial board side of some of these major media outlets, you see words like dictator, threat to democracy, autocrat, oligarch, all these very extreme words, extreme circumstances
You forgot Nazi.
to describe. No, yes, that one too, to describe Trump's election. And, listen, the American public is not stupid. They've been here before. They were present under Trump's first term. They know the world is not ending. Also, President Trump's administration is very transparent. Unlike the Biden administration, they actually hold press conferences. President Trump talks to the media. So the American people see firsthand the president addressing them. They see firsthand him talking to the public. So they know, they can see it with their own eyes that what the press is saying about the world ending under the Trump administration, frankly, is not true. So, you just in saying 11 out of 10 Americans, but I think it's probably about, half the country believes that Trump is just not getting a fair shake under the current media system.
But it's amazing though, because if you look back 4.5 years, remember Trump left office with only 34% approval rating, and now he's at 53%. In some cases, some polls as high as 60%. And that is in spite of literally to the mainstream media outlet, basically bashing him at every opportunity. And I think so much of that has to do with the growth of outlets like this and social media, because before people didn't really have an option except for Fox News and maybe some talk radio. But younger people aren't listening to talk radio, they're listening to podcasts. And the likes of a Joe Rogan, who used to, I mean, this was a guy who was a Bernie Sanders bro, and now he is a pro-Trumper. So how much of a play do you think that has to do with it? The fact that the landscape of media is changing.
Yeah, 100% Ken. And like you said, coming into his first term in office, his second term in office, Trump's approval ratings are 10 points higher than he was coming into 2017 in his first term. And as you said, the mainstream media seems to be against him. But we are now getting our news from a lot of different sources, streaming channels such as this one, podcasts, as you mentioned, the Joe Rogan podcast, and social media. The majority of Americans now get their news from social media, whether that be X, TikTok, YouTube, all different streaming apparatus. But that's where people, and they're finding shows like this. They're finding different sources of media that aren't going to be the MSNBCs, the CNNs of the world. And as a result, the ratings of places like MSNBC are just basically in the toilet. You saw the news this week that Joy Reid is having her show canceled, that they're having a huge shakeup at MSNBC, frankly, because no one's watching them anymore. No one wants to hear left-wing propaganda that is predictably against President Trump and predictably against Republicans. So that's that's what we're seeing here. Americans are looking to get their news from more unbiased sources, and they're seeking out different ways to hear about the truth.
Jeanette, that you say that, I'm tired of hearing the equivocators who say, well, you have the Fox on the right and MSNBC on the left, and they're all full of baloney and they're all extreme and they all lie. Okay, here's the reality. MSNBC has talked about Nazis and existential threat to democracy, and democracy as we know it was going to end if Trump was elected, and he was going to go arrest all these people and blah, 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 on and on it went. None of it came to pass. It didn't come to pass when he was in his first term. It has not come to pass in his second term. So literally, they have been proven false. They've been proven liars. However, when you look at Fox, practically everything that you hear on Fox or other right-wing news sources, if it hasn't happened yet, it will come to pass. And it always ends up coming to pass within 2, 3, 4 months. Perfect example, the Biden laptop, okay? Everyone said it's just propaganda, it's a lie, it doesn't exist. It's 100% true. The FBI had the laptop, but kept it quiet. And as the FBI, literally, while they had it, they just sat there as the right was trying to say it's true and the left was saying it was propaganda, and they just kept their mouths shut because Biden controlled them. The Justice Department was thoroughly corrupt under Biden, but the left-wing media was just in the pocket. They worked hand in hand. It was total corruption. When the right tried to say that, we were called partisan hacks. Well, I'm sorry, but look what came to pass. So this is why Fox has 4, 5, 6 times the viewers that any of the left-wing channels have, because they've proven that everything that they say turns out, whereas on the left, it just isn't the case. And the survey, by the way, shows
100%.
I just want to hit because I'm the one ranting, and I apologize. This survey shows a partisan
Okay.
gap. I'm a good ranter. My husband will tell you. 35% of Republicans have no trust in the media at all, compared to just 13% of Democrats. So what does that say to you? That is it just that Republicans had their eyes open, or that Democrats just don't and they're asleep?
Well, I would just say that a lot of the media outlets, the mainstream cable TV news networks, have been traditionally geared towards liberal thought and democratic policy. So, Democrats, I think, mostly have been okay with that, and Republicans haven't. And I think independents are now coming around to the fact, to your point, that Fox News and other, more right wing media outlets are topping the charts, and others such as MSNBC and CNN are failing. And MSNBC really is dropping like a stone and really having a hard time. They have to shake up the entire network. Rachel Maddow, who used to be on every night, is only getting, I think, Monday nights in terms of her show. But going back to your point of, everyone said that the laptop was disinformation. It was to the point where the New York Post wrote a credible story on Hunter Biden's laptop, and it was banned from Twitter. This was before Elon Musk obviously bought it, but the Biden administration was censoring social media at the time. So, I mean, there's a lot to that. And I think Americans are now waking up and wanting to make sure that our media is unbiased. And if they feel like, there is bias in it, they have a lot more places to go. They have a lot more media outlets to tune into. It's not just a few cable channels on television to get their political and their policy news from, to your point earlier.
And one of the more eye-catching findings is that 43% of Americans, including nearly 3/4 of Republicans, believe the media actively wants Trump to fail. Now, do you think that's a fair perception, or do you think that it's actually a higher percentage and we're not hearing it? Because literally, when you look at 7 stories done on Trump in quote unquote mainstream media, 7 out of 7 stories will be negative, and then any story on the left is a positive story. The view of balance on a network like NBC is having 7 liberals on a panel and 1 lone Republican, or on CNN, their nightly show. That's exactly what they have. They have like 6 Democrats, woke Democrats, and then 1 Republican. And amazingly, that 1 Republican holds his own miraculously. But then they claim that they're unbiased. How do you claim you're unbiased in that case?
Yeah, and it's with a number of policies. It's not just with President Trump. It's with the way they handle the Israel crisis with October 7th, hostages being murdered. They're saying, hostages were found dead. No, they were murdered, right? The way the New York Times and some other groups, media outlets write some of these stories, it's clearly showing their policy bias. And it's not just with President Trump, it's with all policy biases. And I think it's become more clear since we have social media, since we have other ways to expose this, and people are not just picking up in one or two or three newspapers and tuning into one or two or three channels. It's encouraging to see polls like this that show Americans are fully understanding what is happening out there.
Well, Jeanette, clearly you're a Republican strategist and a successful one, and you still have the left. They are not just rolling over and dying, if you will, and I mean that hypothetically dying, not in real life. Let me make that clear. But with the clear sense of frustration that many on the right still have, what's your advice to Republicans and the Trump team on how to navigate the landscape as they move forward? I mean, is the media still going to be an obstacle for them, or do you think they should just keep moving forward with these 2-hour news conferences where they can speak directly to the public?
Yeah, I think Republicans are doing quite well right now. I would argue it's the Democrats that have a huge problem. They can't seem to find a message. The Biden administration failed their party and failed Americans in terms of immigration, inflation, and the economy. Republicans have been doing quite well and speaking clearly and putting the truth out there, putting a lot of messages out there. Listen, sometimes President Trump says things and then says something different the other day. So I think that gets the media in a tizzy. I wouldn't say that's a bad thing, frankly, because it keeps everyone on their toes. But I think, listen, the more that Republicans can speak directly to the media, I see that going on in New Jersey more often every day, that our New Jersey legislators are fighting back against some of these awful, expensive Democratic policies of raising taxes, raising energy rates. Republicans just have to be loud. They have to be, the loudest voice in the room, and they have to speak clearly to the American public. Whether, if they're not getting coverage by the media, then they need to talk, directly to the public through social media.
All right. Jeanette Hoffman, Republican strategist, president of Marathon Communications. Please don't be a stranger. We love when you're on. Come back often. Thanks for being on this morning.
Thanks so much for having me,
have a
Ken.
great day.
I'll talk to you soon.
You bet.
Bye-bye.
You bet. Thank you.